master of the first and the last, and upon his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. My beloved brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, another great opportunity has been afforded to us to reflect upon our history as Muslims and to benefit from what has gone in the past with the intention to implement in the future. And the issue of Islamic revival we have understood to be one of the most important issues facing the Muslim world today. And that is because Muslims today have reached a very strange point in history. And if you study the different waves of people accepting Islam, if you go right back to the beginning, you will see the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ starting with himself, his wife, a few people around him, and Allah opened up the heart of the believers from the poorer class, a few from the aristocrats, and in the Meccan period they struggled. They made hijrah, migration to Ethiopia, eventually to Medina, and there they founded an Islamic state. And it is there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened up on them. And the laws of Islam, the rules of Islam, the completion happened during the Medina period. This is the last 10 years in the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Following his demise, his companions took over the rightly guided caliphs. And Islam began to spread, not because of an intention physically to spread Islam. The main thing that the Prophet, peace be upon him, did was that he sent out letters to the kings. It was an invitation. So it was not a physical raid or an army moving into an area in order to force people to accept Islam, but it was an invitation to the last message. That was his responsibility. And he put that responsibility in his final Arafat sermon upon his companions. And he said that those who are present need to take this message to those who are absent. So it was the job of the companions to take the message to the four corners of the earth. With the message going out to the kings, they got different types of responses. Some of them were positive, as in the case of Najashi, the Negus of Al-Habasha, Ethiopia. Others were neutral, hostile, somewhat afraid, but they were neutral, like the leader of Egypt and to a certain extent the leaders in the Arabian Peninsula. But there were, of the main empires, there were those who were hostile. The Persian Empire, the Roman Empire. And because of physical attacks on the Muslim world, they were forced to go out to meet their enemy. And that sunnah of going out to meet the enemy and not allowing a large army to come into the Arabian Peninsula was established by the Prophet ﷺ himself with what is known as Tabuk. And that is when the Romans had threatened the Muslims, and instead of waiting for 100,000 soldiers to come into Arabia, they went out to Tabuk. Okay? So they went out and they confronted the hostile Persian Empire and the hostile Roman Empire who were attacking them on their borders, and they defeated them by Allah's mercy. And Islam began to spread. And they realized from the reaction of the people that there were thousands, if not millions of people who were actually open to listen to this message, especially because it was bringing justice. It was bringing justice, and it was bringing a type of freedom that they had never felt before, right? And it was opening up a spiritual connection with the creator of the heavens and the earth. So within 100 years, Islam reaches all the way to the Atlantic Ocean on one side, all the way to China on the other side, far north into the Caucasoid Mountains, Chechnya, Dagestan, and then down into the Swahili coast. 100 years. And that's a miracle that this actually happened. With the widespread of Islam and with power and authority coming into their hands, and they're a small group of people, there is naturally tests that come. There are tests. They are under a fitna, trials, tribulations. And so they go through a series of changes. But Islam continues to spread, and through the centuries, there is rise and there is fall. And we are looking at this rise and fall to try to understand what happened, what is within Islam to take the fall back up, and then to even think about possibly how that can be applied today. In the Muslim world today, we are faced with tremendous contradictions. These contradictions are getting more and more extreme by the day. And it is only comforting to know that during the period around the 13th century of the Common Era, AD, the Abbasid Empire had reached a point of corruption, and the Muslims faced the Mongol Empire. And the Mongols, led by Genghis Khan, did not originally attack Muslims. It was actually Muslims who killed some of their merchants. It just gave them a reason. And so they opened up on the Muslim world, and there were so many people killed at that time that some of the Islamic historians say that they thought it was the Day of Judgment. And they thought that the Mongols were Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog. So they thought it was the end of time, literally, because of what they had seen. And when you look at the numbers of people being killed, 500,000 in a city, 3 million in Baghdad, it's hard to even imagine that, okay? And that's the only slight comfort that we can have, even with the things going on today, that we have faced some horrendous situations before, and we bounce back. So the Muslim world today has got a number of clear contradictions. And I had the opportunity to travel to different parts of the Muslim world. And you see this glaring contradiction. You'll see on the left side, and I'll name the countries, this is Afghanistan. And you see children at a school, and there are many parts of the Muslim world where the destruction that has hit their land has taken them back to the very base, primitive has got a lot of meanings to it, but we'll say the most simple form of life, right? I was in the Sahara Desert region in Mali in a place called Timbuktu, which was a great center of learning, and everything was sand. And the people who lived there, the Tuareg people, and the West African Mandingo and Fulanis, it's an extreme situation to be in. By the will of Allah, I was invited after being there to immediately go to the Emirates. And that was a shock, to go from the Sahara Desert region, right, to the Emirates, to probably one of the highest levels in terms of income that people have in the world. So it's extremes. And with the horrendous situations that we see going on in Myanmar, Burma, with the Rohingyas, Kashmir is locked down, in eastern Turkestan, the Xinjiang region in China, people are locked down. Palestine, Gaza at least, is locked down. Central African Republic, dangerous place to live, and it goes on and on. At the same time, that's the contradiction now, because they have just hosted some events, big events in the Emirates. They recently hosted a UFC, big fight, and many Muslims watched it. I'm not a serious UFC fan, my son is. But Habib, the brother from Dagestan, he interests everybody, right? Because he's a serious Muslim. But the contradiction is that although he is a humble person, extremely humble person, what is around him is luxury on the level of Las Vegas. They could rival the fights in Las Vegas. Okay? And Qatar is about to host the World Cup. Okay? And you see major events that are happening there that require millions, if not billions of dollars extra in order to put on those events. And there are other people, like in Yemen, where it is considered to be one of the greatest famines, since World War II, even before that. That's a contradiction, right? And the Prophet ﷺ has informed us, he told us, Inna li kulli umma fitna, wa fitna to ummati al-mal. Every nation has a trial and test, and the trial and test of this nation is wealth. Mal. Too much, too little. Extremes. On this side is a masjid in, can anybody figure out, anybody knows what that is? Germany. That's a masjid in Germany. So when you are praying inside of there, it's like you're not praying in a masjid, you're praying in a planetarium. I went to a masjid in the Emirates. After I had been in Mali, I couldn't hold myself, and I said to one of the brothers, this is not a masjid, man, this is a palace. Like you're praying in a palace. Okay, so it's because of the extreme contradiction, from one side. So it is a time of extreme frustration, contradictions, and it needs level-headed thinking at this time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been very merciful to us, because as we cry for change, Allah has enshrined in the Quran, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah will not change the condition of a people till they change that which is in themselves. So the internal change has to come about. And we have been studying this in the previous semester to try to see something about that change, how that change comes about. And we looked at the concept of reform and revival. And reform, to a certain extent, if you look at the Webster Dictionary, there's a number of meanings. One, to put or change into an improved form or condition. Okay, so you change something into a better condition. You're reforming it. Right? To amend or improve by change or form or removal of faults or abuses. Okay, so it's a reform, that has come about. 2, to put an end to an evil by enforcing or introducing a method or a course of action. So there's something wrong, and then you take a course of action to reform it, to make it better, supposedly to change it, or to induce or cause to abandon evil ways. These are general definitions of reform. The other word, of course, is revival. And sometimes they get confused. The two words get confused. And the Prophet ﷺ has told us, إن الله يبعث لهذه الأمة على رأس كل سنة 100 سنة من يجدد لها دينها. That verily Allah will raise for this ummah at the head of every century or generation someone who will rejuvenate for them their religion. Okay, this is an authentic hadith. There's different forms that it takes, but this is one of the forms of this hadith. And it is saying in Allah yab'ath, that Allah will raise up, right, for the ummah. So this is something which is going to affect the whole Muslim nation. And at the head of every 100 years, qarn is also used in another hadith, ala ra'si kulli qarnin mujaddid. At the head of every century, there would be a reviver. But when the scholars looked at this hadith, after it is saying, men yujaddid laha dinaha. Men means who, we translate in English, but the who can actually, it can be used in the individual sense or a group sense. So it could be an individual, it could be a few individuals, it could be a movement. So men in that sense it's not necessarily just one person on a white horse coming down from the mountain, no. It could be a movement, it could happen simultaneous in different places. The point is, the word is tajdeed. Men yujaddid, tajdeed. And I put rejuvenate, but it can also mean renewal, because tajdeed, you know the word jadid. Jadid is something new. Okay? So in this case, jaddada yujaddidu is to make something new. You're renewing it. Or you're rejuvenating it. Or you are restoring it to how it was prior to the change. Okay? You're restoring it to how it previously was. Okay? This is the concept of tajdeed, which is coming in this tradition. The other concept that comes in traditions and is also being used is ihya. And ihya is literally a revival, to put life into something. So something has died. Ihya, hayat, is like life. So ihya is to put hayat into something. So you're putting life into something. So and some will say it's restoring the status quo without necessarily any attempt to improve it or to reform it. So you're not really reforming the thing, but you're reviving it back. You're putting life back into it. So in other words, there's a vehicle that's there, and the engine has gone down, and the reform would totally maybe bring another vehicle, the newest model, right? But the ihya would be to take that 1960 Mustang, and to renew it with a new engine. You see some people riding it around, riding old cars, right? But it's renewed. So it can go as fast as the other cars, but it's the original vehicle. So you didn't change it, right? And this is important because we are going through a lot of changes as a nation, and many of the world great religions, especially monotheistic religions, have gone through reform. The Jews even have what is called Orthodox and Reform Jews. So you have people who say they're Reform. There are some people who claim to be Jewish and they eat pork. And they eat and they do anything they want on Saturday. Yom HaSabbat, right? Which is supposed to be, their day of rest. But they do what they want to do. Because they supposedly have reformed the religion. And I remember one time I was in an interfaith program, and this woman was sitting there, and they identified her. They said she's a nun, right? So then she looked at me, and so I came over, and she had a miniskirt on, and she had nothing on her head, right? And I had known nuns before as having the nunnery clothing, right? So I looked at her, and we got friendly, and I said, what's happening? Like, what happened to you? And she said, no, this is a modern age now. We want to relate to the youth. So therefore, they can't relate to those nun clothes. So we're wearing the latest, clothing in order to relate to the youth. So she is reforming herself. You see it? She went against her principles of dress, right, in order to meet the feelings of, or the understanding of people in the modern age, right? And that's different. Another thing that sometimes people mix up is Islah. And Islah that's a reform too. That's to repair something. Islah. That is to repair something. And I remember that in the movements that appeared in the 20th century, there were some that were doing dawah in a sense of going out to non-Muslims. There were others who was repairing Muslims. There's one group called the Tabligh Jamaat, and the Tabligh Jamaat is basically a movement of Islah, because it was in 20th century India, Maulana Ilyas and the people, they looked at the community, and they had masjids, they had madrasas, they had cemeteries, they had everything, but the life was gone. So how can you bring the love of the Sunnah, the love of the masajid, the love of Islam back into the hearts of the Muslims? So their job was to go to the Muslim homes and communities, bring them back to the masjid, bring the activities, that were there. It's like, lighting a match in a sense. They were repairing the community. And when people said, okay, what about those non-Muslims over there? This is where there's a difference, because their job is not to go over there. Their job was not, it was really to repair themselves. And that's a Islah. And these words sometimes are interchangeable, because sometimes within a revival there is Islah. So it's got to be inside of it, right? But generally speaking, a reform movement, is focusing, is basically reforming the group. So these are some of the terminologies, that you hear in dealing with revival or reform. But basically, what we're talking about is revival. Okay, we're not talking about reform. Okay, so we want to go back to the original. And this is a struggle that is going on in intellectual circles. This is a struggle which is going on sometimes politically in some Muslim countries, where they want them to change their religion. This is what it appears the Chinese government is doing to Uyghur Muslims, so-called re-education camps. Right? They want them to change their religion, to change their way of life. So this is an issue, because of what Islam means to some people who are afraid of it. Now, looking at some of the definitions of Islamic scholars for tajdeed, okay, because this is our tajdeed. Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri was a great scholar, and this is right in the early stages of Islam, 124 years after the Hijrah, right? That's 724. And he said revival or ihya, to revive of that which has disappeared or died out due to neglect of the Quran and the Sunnah and their requirements. So, you've neglected the Quran, you've neglected the Sunnah, and so you're reviving, what has disappeared or died out. Okay, very straightforward, clear, early, concept. And they were close enough to have memories of the Prophet ﷺ. It's only 124 years. So they had memories still of Sahaba, right? And they could see parts of the Sunnah, not being implemented, the Quran not being implemented. And so this was an early scholarly definition, for tajdeed. Okay? And these things, at the end of the course, I will give you, everybody, access to the PowerPoint. And you can also go over certain things online, so you don't necessarily have to write everything down. You can just write down, the basic thing that you understand from it. Going up to a more modern time, Jalaluddin as-Suyuti, rahimahullah, he was in 911 after the Hijrah, 1505, a great scholar from Egypt. And he said, tajdeed in religion means renewal of its guidance, explanation of its truth, as well as eradication of evil innovation, bid'ah, and eradication of extremism, right, ghulu, or laxity in religion. Think about the Muslim world today. This is serious, Look at that definition. It is to renew the guidance of Islam, to explain the truth that's in it, right? Which, even our own community needs, because we're very ignorant of our religion, right? And also to deal with bid'ah that is in it, okay? And also extremism. And this is what's destroying many communities, extremes, right? The other thing that hurts a lot of us is laxity, especially moral laxity, where you just get loose. And we discussed it, other issues, you just follow what's happening in this society. And you're, jumping around and, whatever, and you got to watch out. We were recently at Muslim Fest in Mississauga, and this is a really good effort which is made by the community to try to provide something for the youth. Because many of the youth, they're in, Jurassic Park, they call it. They're out there, right? So what is our alternative? So they're trying to do that. But it's on a tightrope. Because the dunya is right there, like leaning on you when you're providing entertainment. And for the entertainers, they have to, walk this tightrope, right? And if you don't watch out, the moral laxity can come in easily because of the society itself. So to bring life back is to try to provide what they're trying to do, is to provide a healthy alternative where you can still live by your Islamic principles, you can dress properly, you can eat halal, you stop and make salat, your singers are not swearing, they're not wearing, loose clothes, tight clothes, whatever, and you can enjoy yourself. A young person can enjoy themselves, right? But the tightrope is like so this is part of what Imam Suyuti said. This is really important, okay, of these issues. He also said tajdeed also means observance of people's benefits, societal traditions, and the norms of civilization and Sharia. This is a heavy definition. He's a really, really deep scholar, Imam Suyuti, deep scholar. And so he's showing that, within this revival, you're supposed to be benefiting people, right? If you're reviving Islam and you're putting everybody in a straitjacket, you're putting them in a prison, you're not helping them to live in the society. They can only function in the masjid. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is to be able to function in society itself, right? And you have to take into consideration the societal traditions. You have to take, this is the reality, and balance civilization with Sharia. So we are modern and we're benefiting from society, but we stay within the parameters of Islamic law, right? So these is another important concept when we're dealing with the thing. Now, a recent contemporary scholar, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who is a great scholar, Egyptian scholar, living in Qatar now, and very straight to the point. And he said, combining the beneficial old with the appropriate new. Al-Qadim al-Nafi' wal-Jadid al-Salih. This is a nice definition, just a few words, right? So it's the Al-Qadim al-Nafi', which gives you what benefit of the past with the new things that are appropriate. And Salih means appropriate, correct, viable, right? So you're combining the two now, right? So you're going into the past and getting beneficial things, right? And you're combining it with viable things today. It's a very nice definition. It's very short and to the point, and it's got deep meanings, right? Yusuf Qaradawi. He also said it means being open to the outside world without melting into it. Beautiful definition. So you're open to the outside world, you're functioning in society, but you don't melt down. And this has a lot of meaning for us here. because waves of Muslims came into Canada, America, Caribbean, South America, Latin America. And in some cases, they melted down to the point where there's really nothing left. There were waves of Lebanese, Syrians, Albanians who came 100 years ago to Canada. It's amazing if you study, for instance, Islam in London, Ontario. There's a long tradition in London, Ontario, of Muslims, especially from Lebanon and Syria. Okay? But the struggle that they faced, and also you see it in Alberta, Lac La Biche. There's an old community there. But their generations, because they didn't have scholars with them, they didn't have a lot of institutions, they started melting. So they start melting down until sometimes there's nothing left but a little name, and a few little traditions, there. Even here in Toronto, when we first came to the Jami Mosque and to places like this, alhamdulillah, I was part of that community. 1970, it goes back 69, 70, right? And so the building is there. The Muslims, they're holding on in the best way, but in order to keep their community, their main program was on Sunday. The community gathering was Sunday after Dhuhr. Remember how important Sunday after Dhuhr was, right? Like that, everybody marks Sunday after Dhuhr, masjid, right? But Jummah wasn't necessarily on people's calendar because they didn't really have the freedom and so much had melted down. And in order to try to keep the youth, they even had a discotheque in the basement. So on Friday nights, they would have a little disco for the youth to keep them happy and to keep them coming into the masjid. Okay? That's meltdown. Okay? And inshallah, we'll continue on with this after the salat. Wa billahi tawfiq. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. Are we online okay?
Yeah, okay.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استووا اعتذروا من الصلاة يرحمني ويرحمكم الله. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم ملك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. هو الذي خلقكم فمنكم كافر ومنكم مؤمن والله بما تعملون بصير. خلق السماوات والأرض بالحق وصوركم فأحسن صوركم وإليه المصير. يعلم ما في السماوات والأرض ويعلم ما تسرون وما تعلنون والله عليم بذات الصدور. ألم يأتكم نبأ الذين كفروا من قبل فذاقوا وبال أمرهم ولهم عذاب أليم. ذلك بأنه كانت تأتيهم رسلهم بالبينات فكفروا. ذلك بأنه كانت تأتيهم رسلهم بالبينات فقالوا أبشر يهدوننا فكفروا وتولوا واستغنى الله والله غني حميد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم ملك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. زعم الذين كفروا أن لن يبعثوا قل بلى وربي لتبعثن ثم لتنبؤن بما عملتم وذلك على الله يسير فآمنوا بالله ورسوله والنور الذي أنزلنا والله بما تعملون خبير. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, our classes have started. So tonight, for example, we have Sheikh Abdullah Hakim quick on the lessons from three great revivalists. So if you're able to join the class, in class we have a number of people. If not, there are a number of people online also on our Facebook page and on YouTube. So please join them, inshallah. And if you have relatives, you can share the link with them. They can access the class. Tomorrow is Sheikh Abdul Hamid. He has a class on vocabulary of the Quran. Really interesting class, teaching us words and terminology in the Quran that we can understand when we're reciting the Quran. And also we have a class for youth, high school students with Sheikh Musli Khan. And on Thursday have booklet outside with all of the courses. Some are live classes and some are pre-recorded. You can check it on your own. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
registration form.
No, I don't.
So if you just have one of those, it's attached to it, so I can.
Okay, so I'll do that next week then.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, because it's not rushing, inshallah.
Okay. How are you?
Good.
Yourself?
How many generations can you trace back?
That song?
I'm sure? Yes.
Do it this way, sir.
Can be rearranged.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa bihi nasta'in wa ba'd. As we continue on, we're looking at definitions of tajdeed. So we're looking at definitions of the revival. And Dr. Yusuf Qaradawi, who is one of the leading scholars now, activist scholars in the Muslim world, another definition that he's giving, along with, again, to look at all of them together, it is combining al-qadim al-nafi' wal-jadid al-salih, to combine the beneficial old with the appropriate new. Also within the revival, being open to the outside world without melting. Now this one is a deep one, because we tend to go into extremes. We tend to cocoon ourselves into little masjids or centers. And when you go into the center, you think that you're in Somalia or you're in Karachi or you're in Istanbul, and they're locked into this place. Okay? But that doesn't work today, because with digital technology and everybody carrying cell phones, there's no way you can hide. Okay? But the other extreme is to go out into the society, being open to the society, and suddenly you start forgetting your own principles. You get lost. So how to be open to the world. So in other words, you're going to school, you're going to work, you're part of the society, but you're not melted down. Somebody can look at you, they can tell by your character, even partially by your outward appearance, that you're not the same, you are a Muslim. And you're not melting. Okay, so this really is a major challenge. And thirdly, he said to rejuvenate the religion by the religion itself. So this is another very crucial point for Islamic thinkers, thinking about the 20th century, 21st century. Because what happened to a certain extent in the Muslim world is that with the fall of the Khilafat in Turkey, when we had no more head of state, and with the colonial period, which really kicked in the 19th century, and then beginning 20th century, our countries are conquered now by foreign powers. We were literally submerged in secularism. So we were underneath different lifestyles. And the problem that had developed in many Muslim countries is that in this corruption, without having a renewal, without a leader, then corruption set into our cultures. And to a certain extent, the rich became capitalistically rich, following the Western powers. And so many Muslims believed that the only way out in the 20th century was socialism. Because socialists were bringing down the capitalist system. And so they said Islamic socialist. So you'll have many revolutionary groups who were overthrowing their kings, overthrowing their aristocrats in the name of socialism, which ishtirakiyah in Arabic, which is sharing. I mean, the word itself is okay, and it is Islamic to share. But the problem is, once you say Islamic socialism, you bring in all the baggage of socialism and communism. And that includes godlessness, atheism, no respect for revelation or anything. They make their own way. And it turned out in many of the socialist countries, they became more dictatorial than the king. And some people prayed for the king to come back, but it was too late, because they had already killed the king, destroyed his family, and drove them away. So the baggage, so in other words, they're trying to rejuvenate Islam with another ideology. Many women in Islam felt and still feel that they are being oppressed by the men within the Muslim world. And it was extreme under the corruption, the colonial period. This thing got really bad in some parts of the world. And, trying to understand it is very difficult, but it's almost like when the secular powers crushed the men and did not allow them to rule, no politics, no economics. You can have a little bit of social life. Some places they let you wear your clothes, right? Or you have Muslim law, right? Muslim law, which is only personal law, marriage, divorce, inheritance, whatever. But you're ruled by a colonial system, right? And it's like the men were stifled, and they took it out on the women. So women became terribly oppressed. And this is not in tradition of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ or the active times of Islam, because Islam empowers everybody, including the women. So what was happening in the 20th century is that Western women, with the industrialization, they were also seeking their liberation. And so they formed women's suffrage movement, which became the feminist struggles. And rightfully so, they were fighting for voting rights, property rights. It's something which is hard for a young person to even imagine. But there are some places in America and possibly Canada where right into the 20th century, women were not allowed to own private property. And even in the Catholic Church, not all of them, but there were many of their leaders who believed, right into the 20th century, that a woman does not have a soul. So they were fighting for their dignity, fighting for their humanity within their own system. Of course, in some cases, like in America, there were still African people enslaved underneath them, native people being destroyed. But within their system, they were justly fighting for their rights. So many Muslim women, trying to find a way out, the people from the madrasas were covering up the Islamic traditions and only giving them a little bit. So they start thinking that Islam in itself needs to be changed. We need another ideology, another way in order to come out of this. So they started Muslim feminists. And they were famous feminists, especially in North Africa. Where the Muslim feminists, especially influenced by France. The problem is feminism has baggage with it. The same way socialism has baggage. Feminism went to extremes where it actually started breaking up families. And atheism as well. Disregard for revelation. Disregard for morality. So they went to a certain extent, tried with that, didn't work. And that is the reason why, from the last, say, 30 years or so, in any Muslim country where they had elections, they said, now we will introduce democracy to this part of the world. Big movement in the 20th century, right? Anytime Muslims had the freedom to elect a party, it was just about always the Islamic party would win. But that was not what the West wanted, right? But they would vote for the Islamic party because capitalism failed. Socialism failed. Feminism failed. The only thing is left is Islam. But the problem is, and this is what the Sheikh is talking about, how do you rejuvenate the religion by the religion? So you have to be able to go into the sources, to the original state and bring it back, where you are literally reviving the deen in the hearts of people through the religion itself, right? Showing the revolutionary part of the religion. And when a person has a balanced Islamic education, that's not a difficult thing to do. Our problem is that many of our madrasas became very narrow, and it became very one school of thought and cultural, very much cultural Islam. And so they didn't go back to the Sunnah in terms of a lifestyle. What Yusuf Qaradawi is saying, no. Rejuvenate the religion by the religion. That's revival. This is a very key point right now in the field, because it's still going on in intellectual circles and whatever. Big struggle that is going on, to try to reform Islam, to try to use other ideologies, and to keep down, Islam. So this is a very important point that Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi is. These are some concepts of revival. Okay, I want to open up the floor for any questions anybody may have, or any feedback so far. Because how I'm running the class, for those who are new, is that we will stop periodically and have interaction, if need be, to clarify something, to ask any questions, before we go on to another area. So I want to open up the floor. It's the first day, you might not be used to it. It's a lot of information, but think about questions if you have. And at some points, when I do stop, I'll open for any questions anybody has. Floor is open.
The one on the ayah that you put up there about Allah will not change the condition of people until they change it themselves. Here we are sitting in a classroom having from all the different sources that you're presenting with us. Yet you can end up going online or certain places for Jummah and they will quote this same ayah and they're saying, you see these people punishing, you see this is because this. Whether they know the history of what's going on there or what's happening, and they will say, they deserve this kind of always the message they're putting out.
Because they didn't change themselves, you mean?
Yeah, that maybe something is wrong within these people. That's why this is happening to them. This is why this devastation came on them. And they're using this ayah a lot.
Yeah.
Not in the sense that you're presenting it here, that from the lights of the other scholar from down the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're looking at it in the sense. So the question is that some people are, saying that, like looking back at the verse that Allah will not change the condition of a people till they change that which is in themselves, that some people look at that as a justification for the things that are happening in the Muslim world. Okay? And to a certain extent, we have to blame ourselves. And there is one tradition is actually coming up. We covered it in the 40 hadiths. And, but I'll bring it right now, that the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is part of the 40 hadith of Islamic revival, that ummati hadihi ummatun marhuma, laysa alayha adabun fil akhirah adabuha fil dunya, al-fitan wa zalazil wal-qatl. He said, this, my nation, is a nation that has mercy on it. its punishment is not in the next life. The punishment is in this life. And he mentioned 3 things: fitan, zalazul, qatl. Fitan is the plural of fitna. It's a trial. We will be hit with trials and tribulations. Secondly, zalazul is earthquakes, natural catastrophes. And finally, qatl is genocide, murder. And this, to a certain extent, it's a wake-up call. So we can't, it would be wrong to say those people deserve it, leave them alone. But we can understand what is happening in this ummah if we look at our practice. And we have to be honest. That's all of us. And I traveled to different parts of the Muslim world. Even those who are coming back from Hajj now. I have difficulty going there now because I lived in Medina in 1973. Before they had any of those towers or anything. So to go there now for me is painful to see that. All the materialism and things, one year I had gone back after not being there many times, and we were in this big mall, one of the first malls they had in Mecca, Bin Dawood they called it. That was one of the early ones, right? So we were in Bin Dawood, and the Bedouins and everybody was crowding over to this side. So I said, what is it? They said, Mecca Lotto. It was Mecca Lotto. It was a lottery. Now, I don't know how they justified it. Maybe there is some doubt in it where some scholars might justify gambling. Okay, but it was Mecca Lotto. And some of the things that we were doing, and still now, there's even struggle going on, about opening up discotheques. I mean, they stopped it from Mecca, but Jeddah, they're going for nightclubs. And even some of the worst, raunchiest singers and rappers are being invited. So we're doing this to ourselves. And to a certain extent, that's what the Prophet was saying, fitan. Right? It's going to be a fitna. You're going to be involved. Until you wake up. So in a sense, it's a wake-up call. But we're looking at this in a positive sense, that as we're crying for change, everybody's crying for change, it's not going to happen till we begin inside of ourselves. So this is what we're getting out of this, to look at it in that positive sense. Now, the Mujaddid himself, remember the word tajdeed, and then there is Mujaddid. So Mujaddid is ismu fa'il, the doer of the action, coming from the verb jaddada yujaddidu. So this is the person who makes the tajdeed. So that person is called a Mujaddid. Okay? We learned about Mahdi, who is the promised one at the end of time. Right? But this is Mujaddid. Okay? And the Mujaddid, we know, can be a person. It can be more than one. It could be a movement. But what are the qualities? Okay? If you put it on a person, and this is a scholarly definition of the Mujaddid, it needs to be an excellent Muslim in thought and attitude. Okay? So the person's attitude and thought needs to be on a high level. 2, the person has to have a thorough and comprehensive grasp of Islam. So if a person is a Mujaddid now, really what we're talking about, someone who is really reviving the faith, they should have a comprehensive understanding of Islam. They should be, have memorized the Quran, know the hadiths, they know fiqh, they know tafsir, they know language, they have a good grasp on the religion. Okay? Person could not call themselves, on that level we're talking of tajdeed, if they don't have a thorough and comprehensive. 3, able to distinguish Islam from un-Islam in the finest details. So it's a person who has that cutting edge, that way of distinguishing things. So they have to have this piercing look, because this is not an easy thing to do. You got to sift through all these cultural norms and perversions and things, and then try to bring back the deen. Okay. Next, they have to have the ability to extract the truth from long established falsehoods. So there's things that are going wrong, and sometimes those wrong things, there's truth inside of it. So you've got to be able to take off all the cobwebs and go back to the truth. Because and most of our cultures in the Muslim world are like this. You will go to the culture and you will see a lot of corruption, but you can't throw out all of the culture, because a lot of the culture is Islamic, and the people, to a great extent, the simple people, in their hearts, they're Muslims. They believe in Allah. They love the Prophet ﷺ. So you cannot throw them all out. But the mujaddid has to be able to take off the misunderstandings, the cobwebs, and to get down to the beauty, of Islam, to bring out that, to extract the truth. Okay? Also, clear mind, penetrating vision, unbiased, straight thinking. Okay? Unbiased. That means I'm not stuck in my school of thought. I'm not stuck in my culture. I'm not stuck in my language. Right? Unbiased, straight thinking of the person who's the mujaddid. These are the qualities that we're looking for a person to reach this level. Next, the ability to see the right path clear of all extremes and to keep balance. So they can see the right path, not go into extremes, and they can balance themselves. This is not easy. Next is the ability to think independently of the contemporary and the century-old social and other prejudices. So you have to think independently. I remember, and it's still an issue in some places, that one of the places I was living in, I come to the masjid, and there's no women coming to the masjid, right? And then they said, we don't have women here. So, okay. And then we got to know the community. They said, on Eid day, right, where are the women? We asked the sisters. They said, we're making samosas. Because the brother got to have hot samosas after his Eid Salat, right? It's got to be fresh. So they're busy making samosas while the community is listening to the khutbah and praying the Eid. Okay? And when I asked them, where did this come from? Then there's some problems now. And there was one brother, I'll say, there's one brother who came, I don't like to mention countries, but he was a field dawah worker, and he went into this corrupted place. And he stood up and he said, women, go to the Eid Salat. Go there and enjoy with the community. Everybody, that's the sunnah, whatever. And then the corrupted scholars came to him and they said, you said that? And they came to him like gangsters. And this brother was a field worker. And he said, no, I didn't say that. Rasulullah ﷺ said it. And he gave them 20 hadiths where the women are encouraged to go out to the Eid, even if they're on their periods, their monthly cycles, because it shouldn't be held in the masjid. It's out in the Eidgah, in the musalla. 20 hadiths he brought. And then they said, fitna. You don't know our women. See, this is now their cultural thing, right? He's okay, what's the problem with your women? They have bangles, and it makes noise. And they smell good. So this is a fitna, it's a trial. It's a temptation. They can't come. So then the brother is saying, okay, if the men are here in this section, Mecca's that way, the women are way in back of you, another section. Okay, what's your problem, man? Or is your Qibla the sister section? Or is your Qibla Mecca? You see? If the Qibla is the sister section, you got a problem. So the problem, the onus is on you. You're the one that needs to stay home, not the sisters. You see? So the mujaddid has got to be strong enough that he will not be influenced by the contemporary scholars who might gang up on him. They're going to gang up on him, right? This is our way. This is our madhab. They say this is Imam Abu Hanifa, this is Imam Shafi'i, this is whatever. We had this situation in the Jami Mosque when I was there trying to be, the Imam back in the 80s. It was difficult. Everybody was there. I got so frustrated. I got up and I stood up and I said, Abu Hanifa was not a Pakistani. He was an Arab. Imam Shafi'i was not Somali. Right? He was an Arab. Because we reduced the madhabs almost to a cultural identity. So if you come from this country, you must be this school of thought. But the Imams were not any of these racial groups. Not connected to the racial group. We did that. The Mujaddid has got to be able to independently break through that, all these prejudices, right? And bring you the truth. This is not easy. And that's one of our problems now. Because you go to many masjids and that madhab, that flavor is there. I went to one masjid and, the Imam was reading beautiful, Salat al-Maghrib. He said, Wala Daleen. And I said, Ameen. I was the only one in the masjid. And they looked at me and they said, where's that shaitan? And they came looking for me. Right? And I said, get Bukhari. And they got Bukhari hadith, and I showed them from the hadith that the Sahaba said Ameen so loud, it shook the building. And they said, we didn't know that. Astaghfirullah. Right? Prejudice, right? The Mujaddid's got to cut through the prejudice. Next, he has to have courage, right? Courage to fight against the evils of the time. He's got to have the courage to do this. Today you're going to be Islamists. You're going to be labeled. But the Mujaddid has to have the courage to fight against this. Stand. And it's not a negative fight, it's a positive fight. Also, and this is important, he's got to have the competency in ijtihad and the work of reconstruction. Which means this is to make a informed religious decision in a particular area that meets the time and the circumstances. It's like an ijtihad. There's a new thing that's there, and you can make the decision, about this issue. Okay, and so he's got to be competent in ijtihad. Now, some of the misconceptions about the Mujaddid, because people will tend to try to put Mujaddid on anybody that they want, and there's some misconceptions concerning, who is a Mujaddid and what it is. Number one, the Mujaddid is not a formal designation, like a prophet or a messenger, right? Well, that's going to stick, right? It is only through his work that he's recognized. Right? And normally the person would be recognized as a Mujaddid after they're gone. During his time he might be hated by a lot of people, including some of the corrupted Maulanas and Sheikhs. They might hate this guy. Right? And then recognize later on. 2, a true Mujaddid does not claim to be a Mujaddid with certainty, nor does he invite others to believe in him as such. Right? He does not claim it. And if somebody's claiming it, watch out. Like we said before in one of our classes, that if somebody comes to you and says he's Mahdi, he's the Mahdi, go the other way. There's something mentally wrong with this person. You're not supposed to claim it. Right? So a person also, if the person's claiming I am Mujaddid of this time period, right? He didn't take his medication. Or he smoked something. Right? This is something wrong with him. You cannot make a claim like this. And worst, if you invite other people to believe in you, you can become like a charlatan, a pretender, a dangerous, like Dajjal type of person. 3, even if the majority of Muslims is of opinion that a particular person is a mujaddid, there is no religious obligation on the others to believe him as a mujaddid. So many people recognized the great work of certain scholars in their lifetime, and they wanted to pin on certain things to them. But somewhere else, there's no obligation that you have to follow that person. There's no obligation. Okay? Because it's really not the individual, but it's the work that they're doing. It's the stand that they take, right? It's the renewal of the faith. That is what you'll be following, not the person as an individual. Right? Although he's supposed to be of, remember, sound mind and good character. But it's not like a personality cult. Right? And that's very important. Okay? Some other misconceptions. Number 4, the mujaddid does not receive any authentic revelation from Allah like a prophet, nor does he claim such. There's no revelation. Wahi. Now, there is a thing called karama. And karama is a miracle, that can happen, to any Muslim. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said what is left of the revelation is a righteous dream that comes to a believer. But you can't say your dream is correct until afterwards. You cannot predict based on the dream. Okay? So the mujaddid is not receiving revelation. That has to be clear. Five, it is not necessary that a mujaddid knows himself to be a mujaddid, let alone laying any claim to this effect. Okay? That's not necessary. And 6, a mujaddid is not infallible in his sayings and acts like a prophet. Infallible meaning doesn't make mistakes. His sayings and acts normally conform to the Islamic teachings, but they are not treated like the sayings and acts of a prophet. Okay? And this is Sheikh Taqiyuddin Usmani. Many of you may know Sheikh Taqiyuddin Usmani. He's a judge, a jurist from Pakistan, a very well-known jurist. These are his words about who is a mujaddid and misconceptions and whatnot, right? Because this is a very important issue, especially in the Indo-Pakistani subcontinent. A lot of discussions, come around this. People appear, movements appear, and so it's very important to get it clear, who is a mujaddid and who's not a mujaddid. That's very crucial. Any questions that anybody has? Floor is open for any feedback or questions concerning the mujaddid himself. And you will see the name put on certain people. When you read their biography, you'll see Mujaddid Asani or this one, whatever, Mujaddid this, you'll see it there. And this is what people will think. And there are scholars, even Sheikh Abul Hassan al-Nadwi and other scholars, he did a book called Saviors of the Islamic Spirit. If you can get this book by al-Nadwi, translated into English. Saviors of the Islamic Spirit. It's 3 volumes. It was originally done in Arabic, because Nadwi was originally Yemeni. He's raised in India. So it's originally done in Arabic. Saviors of the Islamic Spirit. I believe you can get it online. And what he did was he went through different people throughout Islamic history to show you individuals, who may fall in this category. Any questions anybody has so far on anything? Sheikh Abul Hassan al-Nadwi. Abul Hassan al-Nadwi. Saviors of the Islamic Spirit. Right? It's translated. Now this tajdeed, in terms of the cycle of the tajdeed, we had looked at this, we discussed this in the sense of Ibn Khaldun, who was one of the great scholars from North Africa, from Tunisia. He, over 1,000 years ago, he wrote an introduction to a history of the Muslim world. And his muqaddamah, for the first time, looked not just at kings and people, but it said, what is the relationship of people one to another? And some people call him the father of sociology. Many sociologists recognize. Because the first time he's looking at social relations. And in his muqaddamah, which is another book you can get, in his muqaddamah, he spoke about the cyclical change in Islamic history. And, he spoke about the fact that there was a rise and fall of civilization. He said it's about every 4 generations or so. It's like a cyclical pattern. And it's related to arts, sciences, and especially good governance and justice. And what he said is that Muslim societies, in the beginning are maybe very vibrant, and then after a generation, if they don't revive their faith, it gets a little bit weaker, and then it starts, by the 4th generation, it can actually become corrupt. And in some parts of the world, you can actually see the cycle go. You can see it like a cycle run, And so that's an interesting thing. But again, we cannot say exactly when the Mujaddid is going to come, or when the Tajdeed is going to come, because it could be 100 years, it could be a generation. Because Qarn also can mean generation. Right? Now, in this light, I put together a book, the 40 Hadith on Islamic Revival. And we had studied from this book in the last semester. And this was put together after years in the field and going to different communities. I recognized that the bottom line for Muslims everywhere is reviving Islam. But there were certain issues that we face now that are not the same as they were facing 100 years, 500 years ago. So this is done in the manner of Imam an-Nawawi's book, in that style, but the titles are different, the hadiths are different. There's a few that are the same, but there are different sections: peer pressure, intoxication, treatment of women, superstition. There's some things that you might not find, in one of the classical books. And this is the basis of a Tajdeed type of movement. Okay? And this will be available. Many of the students here already have the book. If you don't have it, you can get it. Because many of the traditions that we take come out of this book. And the revivalists that we're going to look at, they are influenced, by they are influenced by many of these hadiths. Okay, relative to us. Okay, so within that 40 hadith of Islamic revival, we want to look at a couple now in our orientation session this week. The first one is the hadith that we just looked at. And that was hadith number 2, actually, in the 40 hadiths. Okay, and it's very interesting how it's divided up, right? That this, my ummah, is a nation that has mercy on it. Its punishment is not in the hereafter, but it is in this world, right? In the dunya, fitan, zalazal, and qatl. So these are the trials and tribulations that we are going through in this world. Because, many new Muslims and people whose faith has been revived, they will say, why are these things happening to us? What kind of religion is this? Why? Look how many Muslims we have in the world. Look how much money we have. Look at the Quran and Hadith are still in the original form. What's your problem, right? Right? And so this is the wake-up call. Because it's one thing, to say you believe. But if you go off, there's consequences. Which is actually a mercy to us. And that's the reason why we're still going, or part of the reason after Allah's mercy. And They're not reading about us like the Roman Empire and saying those people were really strong. We're here, and we're growing back, right? We're still all over the place. So another hadith which is important just to quickly, go through again, because it gives the theme of what is happening today. And we're only going to look at a few from this book in our orientation, is that the Prophet ﷺ, in his hadith reported by Thawban, informed his companions and told them, يُوشِكُ الْأُمَمْ أَن تَدَاعَ عَلَيْكُمْ كَمَا تَدَاعَ الْأَكْلَةُ إِلَى قَصْعَتِهَا فَقَالَ قَائِلٌ وَمِنْ قِلَّةٍ نَحْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ قَالَ بَلْ أَنْتُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ كَثِيرٌ وَلَكِنَّكُمْ غُثَاءٌ كَغُثَاءِ السَّيْلِ وَلَيَنْزَعَنَّ اللَّهُ مِنْ صُدُورِ عَدُوِّكُمُ الْمَحَابَةَ مِنْكُمْ وَلَيَقْذِفَنَّ اللَّهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمُ الْوَهْنَ فَقَالَ قَائِلٌ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَمَا الْوَهْنُ قَالَ حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. So the Prophet ﷺ said the nations are about to call one another and descend upon you as those who are eating invite others in sharing food. And this you can see happening in different parts up until now. They're pouncing on us, right? And then they asked, will that be because we are few in number? That's a good question. There couldn't be a lot of Muslims, right? If they're going to be pouncing on us. And he said, and then he told them, no, at that time you will be numerous. All over the place, right? 3 million Hujjaj. Right? Masjids all over the world. Right? But then he said, you will be the froth carried by the torrent. Ghutha. Ka ghutha as-sayl. Like the foam and sticks carried by a river. The river goes to the right, it goes to the right. Goes to the left, it goes to the left. It looks like a lot. The foam in some places looks like a lot, but there's no roots. So it's carried anywhere. See the concept? It's a beautiful concept. So you're a lot, but you have no weight. Then the Prophet said, Allah will remove the fear of you from the hearts of your enemies and put a weakness into your hearts. And that is not the fear like the fear of danger. It's like respect. It's izzah. So if somebody's, izzah, and the example we use is like the lion, that is there. The lion has izzah. It doesn't kill the other animals. The lion's not a serial killer. It only kills to eat. But it has izzah. It has majesty. It has might and respect. The Prophet said, Allah is going to take that out of the hearts of your enemies. Look at them now. What they're doing in China to the Muslim, Kashmir. That's insane. Right? And some other foolish Muslims will come along, and act like everything is fine. Right? Something's wrong with their hearts, man. And as the Prophet said, there will be a weakness put into your hearts. And then they asked him, what is it? He told them, حُبِّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. You will love the dunya and you hate to die. Be afraid to die. You love the dunya. Look at it now. Right? That's the test. And this is part of the wake-up call. So this is what sets the background for us. And we realized that the revival begins within. It's inside of ourself that the revival actually begins. Okay? And remember that the verse is saying, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change that which is in themselves, right? So that's where the revival starts. And we found out that the heart is a key issue. And hadith number 4 said, verily Allah does not look at your bodies nor at your appearances, but He looks at your hearts and your deeds. Yanduru ila qulubikum wa a'malikum. Allah looks at your hearts and your deeds, not your bodies or your appearances. And then in the long tradition we found that part, that verily in the body, in the fil jasadi mudgha, idha salahat salaha al jasadu kullu, wa idha fasadat fasada al jasadu kullu, Allah wa hiya al qalb. Verily in the body there is a lump of flesh, which if it is in good repair, all the body will be in good condition, and which if it is corrupt, the whole body will be corrupted. And that is the heart. So the mujaddid has got to deal with the diseases of the hearts. The mujaddid's got to have piercing knowledge to be able to go in the inside of the Muslims, inside of our personalities and our lives. Okay? And Allah tells us that the day on which neither wealth nor children will be of benefit except who comes to Allah with a sound heart. Right? Whoever comes to Allah biqalbin salim, with a sound heart, that's the one on the Day of Judgment. Gets the ultimate success. Okay? Those who come with a sound heart. Then we found out also that, and these are all within our 40 hadiths, that there are certain crucial qualities in the revival. Okay? And one of the traditions, again, which is very important, and this is one that most people are not aware of. This is one of the gems, I think, inside of this text. One of the scholars of Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani, Sheikh Ali from Jordan, he found it, he got this tradition, and I got it from his text. It's very interesting, hadith in As-Sahih Jam al-Jawami', and that is that Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anh, he was the oldest male member of the Prophet's family. And when the Prophet ﷺ died, Ali had to deal with his janazah. So he was the one who had to, and there wasn't many things for his inheritance. One of them was his sword. And Ali said, when I took possession of the weapon of the Messenger of Allah, I found in the hilt of the sword, the handle, a parchment. So the Prophet must have dictated to somebody. He was not lettered himself, but he must have Ali could read, and the Prophet knew that. Ali was one of his scribes. Okay? So what did it say in the hilt? Sil man qata'aka wa ahsan ila man asa ilayk wa qul al-haq wa law ala nafsik. Keep relations with those who cut you off. Behave well towards those who treat you badly. And speak the truth even if it's against yourself. This is a serious tradition. This flies in the face of all the Islamophobic descriptions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and of Islam. Look at this. I read this to some Christian, they said, that's Jesus Christ. That sounds like Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount or something. Right? This is the legacy of truth and tolerance, right, within our deen. The revival also purifies our faith and our dealings, mu'amalat. So the revival starts in the heart, it comes out in your character, right? And then your dealings. So your dealings are supposed to change. So if the person goes to Hajj, makes dua, comes back, goes to his shop, he names his shop Al-Hajj Zaid, come to my shop, and then he comes in the store and he raises the prices. Didn't work, man. Where is what's the benefit? Right? So this revival is supposed to come out in dealings. Okay? And so these are some of the points within the 40 hadith, and those who don't have it, this is a good book, again, to have, to constantly go over. Certain issues will come up, and you'll have an answer. Okay? This is one of my trade secrets. I don't have a memory like scholars, right? But if I carry this to anywhere I'm going, and some issue comes up, there's probably an answer right in here. And I'm telling you, I have gone to many different parts of the world, and inevitably in the khutbah, one of these hadiths is going to be mentioned. Almost 8 out of 10 times in different parts of the world. And this is not because of some revelation that came to me. It is just because of dealing with Muslim problems and trying to find a solution, like other teachers are doing. So it's encapsulated here within the 40 hadiths. So the 3 great revivalists, that we want to look at, who are agreed upon, by people. Again, this is not a title like messenger or prophet or anything like that. But you'll see from their great example, there's many different people, but I chose three. One is Imam al-Ghazali, Sheikh Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, right? And, who comes, from Tus, from Iran, Khorasan. He's from the Khorasan region. You've heard of Imam al-Ghazali. He is probably one of the greatest of all of these people. He influenced everybody. Okay, and we want to look at his life, what happened to him in his life, and then look at some of his teachings. Okay, it's impossible to cover him in a few sessions. We're basically in September and October, right? September and October is our classes of this. So we will look at, we'll get some, overview of his teachings. Another is Sheikh Uthman Danfodio, who most people do not know about here, unless you're from West Africa. But he was a great West African scholar. And he revived the faith in that region and recognized, by many people throughout the world. Amazing teachings. His life is an amazing, tribute, to Islam. And I personally studied his teachings. I went to his land and met his family members, and got intimately involved in his teachings. Okay, so I'm going to give you some of this information concerning Sheikh Uthman Danfodio. And Shah Wali Allah Dahlawi, the great Mujaddid, we believe, from India. Great scholar, great influence that he had on people. So we want to look at these people so you get different flavor from different parts of the world within their, their tajdeed. But the teachings stand the test of time because they come from the Quran and the Sunnah. As Imam al-Zuhri said, you left the Quran and the Sunnah, somebody's got to bring it back. Like Sheikh Yusuf said, that you rejuvenate the religion through the religion, right? So it's connected to the, timeless teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah. So these are the great revivalists. Next week, inshallah, we will begin with Imam al-Ghazali. So we'll be looking at his life and his achievements and some of his teachings, inshallah, for the next, couple weeks. So we will look at Imam al-Ghazali. Any questions anybody has? Floor is open for any questions or feedback anybody has.
You don't have anyone in the 20th century?
No, not at this point. Yeah. I mean, normally people recognize, again, it's not a title, right? And normally the person is recognized after they go, right? Because normally even they themselves would not want that title. Okay, so when you see the effect of the influence of their teachings, so no, we don't, yeah. Some might say Sheikh Sha'rawi of Egypt was a great teacher, could be. Although many people outside of the Arab world probably don't know Sha'rawi at all. But yeah, he was one who was a great teacher. But of the living people now, there's some who are great scholars, but again, we don't even want to go that way because today there's too much cultism. So you start saying that's the one, and everybody's got that's the one. They start worshiping him and this is not. This is wrong. No.
So my question is how to consolidate two people who are both parties are Muslims, but they are fighting because one is more liberal, quote unquote, and one more traditional, quote unquote. And also there are people like me who keep studying and then look at these two people who are fighting because one it's believed that being free and also go with the flow type of Muslim, it's their choice because in democratic society,
Sure.
it's a freedom to do that, and also the following the Sunnah, Quran and Sunnah, it's more like all radical extremists type of thing, and in both parties are fighting within small communities.
Yeah. Well, you know, for us, we're looking at the revival of Islam.
Yes.
So our basis is the Quran and the Sunnah. So if a person doesn't believe in Islam, they're not even in our discussion, right? Because they don't even believe in, like Sheikh Yusuf was saying, that we want to rejuvenate Islam by the religion itself, not by socialism, feminism, any of these secular things, you know. But at the same time, the challenge is for a mujaddid, is that as was said by Sheikh Taqiyuddin, that, you know, or was it Sheikh Qadawi, that the mujaddid's got to be open to society, but they don't melt down. So the teachings is open to that person. If that person who's a secularist is open-minded person, they can look at the teachings and see something which is usable and valid, right? And that's the beauty of it. But to be honest, ultimately speaking, we are talking about the revival of Islam. We're talking about reviving Islam. So if a person doesn't even consider Islam to be their solution, then they're on another road. We can help them, try to get them to come back. Now, within Islam, now you have a struggle between people who claim to be Muslim, but they're secular, and some claim to be traditionalists within Islam, right? In that case, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, speak the truth even if it's against yourself. As the Quran says, Hatu burhanukum in kuntum sadiqeen. You know, so you put the Quran and Sunnah there, and, you know, forget all your madhabs and your movements. What did the Quran and Sunnah say? And if it's there, we have to agree to accept it, or not to accept it.
That's his point. That, you know, both groups, both persons are Muslims.
Right.
They both claim to be Muslims. One is, you know, practicing, you know, occasionally. The other one is, you know, more regular. So that's what he's talking about. So how do we reconcile?
Well, you know, again, you know, it's got to be we have to be open. The society, the religion, the tajdeed is open to people, and because a masjid, you know, that say for instance there are women, you know, who haven't been covering themselves up, right? But they want to come back to the masjid. So if they come in the masjid and maybe outside she doesn't have a scarf on, but she comes in and then puts on a scarf, right? She shouldn't be rejected by the sisters. In some masjid, they say, you're a hypocrite, right? Don't come in here, right? So how is she going to learn to love the wearing hijab if she's not around people who do it? So you have to give everybody space, right? There's got to be space, you know, for people who want to go through their changes, you know? And so that's part of the patience, you know, that is needed in the tajdeed. However, you know, the basis is clear, that we're not reforming the religion. And some people want to reform the religion, where they will have the Jumu'ah khutbah, you know, given by a woman, you know, and they'll do things, you know, that's totally against, you know, our traditions and ways. You know, whatever, they'll purposely do things that will upset, you know, our community, and is done in order to upset us, right? So therefore, we have to be straightforward, but open-minded at the same time. Because no doubt, there are women who are oppressed in many masjids, in many places. There are even some masjids, even in our own city still, that try to keep women out. This is backwardness, and it needs to be struggled against. Now, floor is open. Yes, bro.
What event took place for Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to say Judgment Day for Muslims is in this life, not the next? Trials, murder, earthquakes, etc.
Yeah, the events, I'm not sure of the actual events in his time, but it is more looking to the future.
There's a hadith, right?
Yeah, so this is hadith here. This is hadith reported in, and so I'm not sure the exact events surrounding the hadith, to be honest with you, but it is it's talking about this nation. It's part of the quality of this ummah. In other words, Allah, He's having mercy on us, because when we go off, He's going to straighten us out. He's going to give us a wake-up call with trials, with earthquakes, with murder. And if you look at Islamic history, you'll see, after the great destructions, after the Mongols came and destroyed half the Muslim world, there was a revival of Islam. And during the Mamluk period, the Mamluks of Egypt, during that period, many of the great scholars, Ibn Kathir, and so many great scholars that you read now, is during that period, after the Mongols. So it was a revival. So he's really talking about the nature of the community, which is going to continue, and we see it happening to us now. It's happening to us now. But if you look at it in a positive way, it's a wake-up call. And Allah is having mercy on us, actually. Because at least we have Tawheed. If we hold on to that, inshallah, Muslims, can be ultimately saved in the next life. Even if they have to burn for a period of time in hellfire. Well, iyadu billah. But having the Tawheed can eventually, save them even from that.
Does that justify the comment people are saying now, because of the Muslim community's actions, we are being punished in all over the world? They're justifying it?
It is a reality, because the hadith is clear and you can see the things happening, but it should not be used to not help anybody. In other words, you say, well, these people deserve it, so let them starve.
That's what being said.
No, that's wrong, right? We have to help each other as much as we can, because we're all making mistakes. And when our term comes around, you don't want anybody saying that about you. Because we're all subject to destruction. Look at the Bahamas now. I mean, we're all subject to catastrophes at any moment, right? So you cannot look at somebody else's tragedy and then, justify it. But we can understand, we can't blame anybody but ourselves. You can't keep saying the West, the West, the West. It's not just the West. The real problem came within us. I remember that in the Middle Eastern countries, I was reading this scholar, he was talking about the Crusaders when they first came. And he said, they're animals with a good fighting spirit. That's how he described them. He said they're animals in terms of culture and medicine and all that. Good fighting spirit, though. And now it's turned around on them. Because he was arrogant, right? He's too arrogant. If you're so arrogant, then you start fighting each other and start becoming racist and tribalist, then you're going to get punished. So it is a reality.
Imam Ghazali, is it from Khorasan?
Yeah, from Khorasan, which is Tus. He's At-Tusi, which is present-day Iran.
So was that part of the shared community at that time there?
No, I mean, we'll talk about it next week more, but they were under the Seljuks. The Seljuk, it was, the Seljuk. Yeah, we'll talk about, we'll go into his life more, you'll see where he was from and, what was actually happening. Okay, any other questions before we close the class? So inshallah, we'll see you again next week. Billahi tawfiq, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Those who don't, if you can take these, to give these out to people so they know about all of our classes. This is also available, $15, anybody who wants, this book, it's available.